All right. So, welcome to our first session of our orientation. We're doing it a little bit different. I know. I'm just going to pull up. Okay. So I've got lots of new people. Welcome to Liz, who I have been meaning to call you. I just have been busy. So, but so we're doing a little bit different. We're going to do once a month sessions with our orientation. If something comes up in the meantime, please feel free to give me a call. But so what I'm going to do is I am going to, and if for those of you that are joined, just so I have a record, it's a little bit easier for me if in the chat box on the Zoom session, if you look at the bottom, you see a chat box. If you could just type your name and the county in that box, that would be super helpful to me. Otherwise, I have to sit and write down names, and so it is a lot easier if I can get you to, or if you can do that for me. That would be fantastic. The other piece, just to let you know, is I am recording the session, and then I will be putting all of the PowerPoints and a link to the recording in a Nevada box, and then I will send out the link. I'll send it out to everybody because it won't be just one person or it won't be just you guys watching it. My guess is it'll be quite a few people watching it. So, all right, we are going to start with, I want to start with kind of a pre-test polling questions. So I'm going to relaunch. Okay. So can everybody see these questions? No, I don't. Can everybody see these questions? And on this system, I forgot to let you guys know too, we've got a little bit of a problem in that it doesn't allow me for communication two ways. So you're going to have to type in the chat box. I apologize for that. That's just one of the ways with this system. I'm not sure. Okay, so you guys can see these. There should be, I think, 3 questions or 4 questions, 3 questions up there. And can you see them? If you can, just type in yes in the chat box. Okay, so what I want you to do, and you guys can answer them, correct? If you can answer them, go ahead and just answer what you think those answers are. I haven't played with the polling for a long time, so that's why I'm like trying to see if it works. And it's not showing that anybody's answering yet. And that's why I'm not sure, because what I'm seeing looks different than I think what you're seeing. Okay. All right. So, yeah, so I'm going to have to play with the polling. Thanks. Okay. Thank you, guys. You're kind of my guinea pigs this week. I'll play with it some more so I know how to use it for next time. But so just in the chat box, for this first question, what act of Congress established the land grant system? Can you just type in the chat box what you think that answer is? Okay. Okay, great. And then what about the second question, the Moral Act of 1890, what did it establish? You can also just put in like A, B, C, and D, and I'll know which answer those are. Okay. And then the last question on these questions is, what was the first land-grant university? I'll give Jillian a second to, okay. I'll give Jillian a second to answer that one. Okay. All right. So when we get into that section, you guys will learn those answers and we'll go back. So, but I want to share with you now, and this is going to take me just, okay, there we go. Okay, I'm going to share my screen. We're going to talk briefly right now about the about what I'm basing a lot of the orientation on, but this is really, and it may be a little bit confusing to you right now, but believe me, hopefully you'll learn more about it, and I'm going to give you guys some links and things that you can look at it. But what this is the 4-H PRKC, which is our 4-H Professional Research Knowledge and Competencies. This is a system that was designed to help our 4-H staff to know what competencies would be good to have as 4-H professionals. Now, I will tell you, again, it's a framework used to guide professional development efforts within 4-H youth development. One of the things at the National 4-H Agents Association, or 4-H Professionals Association, which we'll talk about, that's our professional organization. And we do have an annual conference every year. It's held in different places in the country. This next year, in 2019, it's held in West Virginia, but in 2020, it's being held in Boise and up in Idaho. And so that's the one that I'm highly encouraging everybody to attend. So, but one of the things that they do with that conference is all of the workshops are what competency or what area that they are going to reach as far as within this PRKC. And really, just as our 4-Hers strive to make, our 4-Hers strive to make the best better, we as 4-H professionals need to strive to give them the best, and that's really what this PRKC does. So they kind of just a brief history of it. It was introduced in 1985 by NAE 4HA, which is the National Association of Extension 4-H Agents. That is our national professional association. They were the ones that created the original model. It was introduced as the 4-H PRK, which was Professional Research and Knowledge. In 2004, it was revised and reintroduced, adding the C for the competencies. And so it not only included the research and knowledge, but also those competencies. And then in 2017, after about a two-year process, it was reviewed again and revised, and it was introduced again. There weren't a lot of major changes to it, but there are some things, as we know, research changes. There's been some new things that have been happening in the area of brain development. And so it really, and then also mental health and trauma-informed care, that even in 2014 or 2004, that wasn't really on 4-H's radar as far as being important to us. I mean, it's always been important, but not something that we felt like, needed to be included. But in 2017, it was, those pieces were included. So this is the link. When you get the PowerPoints, that's a link to the full PRK, the PRKC. There's also a self-assessment that goes with that. And I've actually been working on trying to get that self-assessment. I'm going to put it into an electronic format, and I'm going to actually send it out to all of our staff so I can see where we are in a need for professional development. And so, but you feel free to take that. You'll be able to just kind of see where you are. So just how it's organized is there are domains within the PRKC. Those are, big topics. Those are things like youth development, youth program development, volunteerism. I'm going to go into those in just a second. Within that, there are topics. So those are kind of the next level. And so within youth development, the domain of youth development, the first topic is growth and development. And so that's looking at 5 to 19 years old. Underneath the topics, there are components. So again, you've got mental health. And then under the mental health, there may be one or there might be 2 or 3 competencies. So one of the examples here is a competency within the area of mental health for youth is the knowledge and the ability to identify common mental health issues. So not necessarily how to treat, and when you look at it, you don't have to treat them. It's just understanding and being able to identify some of those common ones. So just to go over the 6 domains of the PRKC, there's youth development, and that's really understanding how young people learn and grow. We have youth program development, and that is where we look at creating quality experiences for young people. There's volunteerism, so preparing volunteers to make a real difference. Equity, actually that one is now access, equity, and opportunity. And that's ensuring that each young person has a chance to succeed. There's partnerships, uniting young people and adults for stronger communities. And then organizational systems. So that is connecting people and priorities for the greatest impact. So just to kind of go through each one of the domains so you know what's within each of the domains. So the youth development domain is really utilizing that knowledge and that understanding of human growth and development, the process to create the environments to help our young people reach full potential. You'll hear us say time and time again, our subject matter expertise within 4-H youth development is youth development. It's positive youth development. So, we are not a livestock person. We are not, we should be positive youth development. That should be our subject matter expertise. And so within that, there is the topics. So kind of the main topics within that are growth and development, youth development theory, and then youth development practice. So under youth development theory, it might be developmental levels, so ages and stages, and those types of areas. That's actually under growth and development, but we've got some theory under there. Under the youth program development, that's really planning, implementing, and evaluating programs to achieve our outcomes. And so under that, we have community and program needs assessment. So there's some things within that, the needs assessment area, program design, program delivery, and program evaluation. Then volunteerism is building and maintaining a strong volunteer management system for the delivery of our youth development programs. Because we all know that, if we were to try to reach the young people, we wouldn't be able to do it ourselves. We need our volunteers in order to have that happen. And so, but part of that is we can't just say, okay, adults go out and prosper. We have to give them the basics. We have to, come up with some kind of volunteer management system. We have to be able to train them in certain areas. And so that's both your personal readiness for volunteer development, because, we need to find out ourselves, are we ready to turn things over to volunteers? And do we know what we need to know? Our organizational readiness, the identification of volunteers, volunteer development, volunteer training, and then program management. Access, equity, and opportunity is interacting effectively and equitably with diverse individuals and building those long-term relationships with diverse communities. Now, I will tell you, when I look at access, equity, and opportunity, it's not just racial diversity. And that's where we get stuck a lot of times, is racial diversity. It really is a lot of, it's looking at all vulnerable populations. So it might be, I think about, so like Elko County, you guys have got, think about some of the communities that are very far out, that may not have many services. That's a vulnerable population, because those young people don't have all of the opportunities that maybe the youth in Elko have. And so we have to think about it, it can be socioeconomic, it can be physical location, it can be a whole variety of things. And so it's really looking at sensitivity, awareness, the communication, inclusive programming, and inclusive organizations. And partnerships is really engaging youth in community development and the broader community in youth development. One of the things that I would love to see in all of our communities, and I know it's not there yet, but having some kind of youth commission, or a youth program where young people are actually asked their opinions, and asked to give input into the community. And then also, one of the things that I found very, very helpful early in my career was, in one of the communities I lived in, we had a youth advocacy council, I think is what it was called. And within that, everybody that worked with youth in our community got together. I think I don't remember if we did once a month or if we did once a quarter. I don't remember exactly what that was, but we got together and talked about issues within our community. So if we saw a high suicide rate within the community, within young people, we could get together as all youth development professionals and talk about that and come up with some strategies as a community to help deal with that. And so we were all on the same page. And, that is just a great, that's one great partnership that could be formed in our areas. And then, an extension in 4-H was seen as one of the leaders in youth development. And so, we got asked a lot of times to go into other organizations and do training about what is, how do you positively work with young people. But this area really looks at youth as partners, so youth-adult partnerships, families as partners, because we know we can't be successful with our young people if we don't have our families involved, and then organizations and communities as partners. And then the last one is organizational systems. So that's really positioning our organization and our people to work with and work on behalf of young people most effectively. So this is where it gets into kind of the more nitty-gritty. So organizational effectiveness, our personal effectiveness, marketing and public relations, resource development and management, risk management, and professionalism. So again, I'm going to be sending you guys the link to these. It really is, there's some really good resources. Sorry, I'm trying to get it off. And I actually have them. I'm going to share this with you guys because I actually have them pulled up. I pulled up the website that they're on. So these are the references. Here's what, I'll show you what the document, I'm going to make sure you guys can see this. Okay. Can you guys see that? I'm pulling up the chat box so I can see the chat box. Sorry, guys. There we go. Can you guys see this, the Growing Together 4-H Professionals Research, Knowledge, and Competencies document? Okay, good. Sometimes my computer will show it, sometimes it doesn't. So I'm going to just quickly, this is just a letter talking about it. And then the people that were part of all of the teams. And what was really nice about this revision in 2017 is we didn't try to just have state specialists or state program leaders on these committees. There was a whole variety of individuals. There were 4-H coordinators, there were 4-H educators, and there were state staff, there were a few state program leaders. We actually had a few retired individuals that were involved in this. And so that's what made it was really kind of a cool system. And so it was fun to work on. It was a lot of fun to work on. So yeah, so that's the list of people. And then you can see so then it goes into the competencies. So I'm just going to briefly show you so here it talks about the youth development domain, the growth and development, the component, and then under physical development, and then the competencies. Now, I will tell you, this document will look overwhelming, and do not feel like, oh my gosh, I don't have all of these competencies. When I did my dissertation, I used the PRKC as my basis for that work. And at that time, I found that there were 256 competencies that a 4-H professional should have. I don't have all 256 competencies, and I've been doing this, not next week, the week after, I will start my 25th year working in 4-H youth development. And you're not going to have all of them all at one time. You're going to pick up things, but it's good to just kind of see, here's some things that you should know about. So you can see, that you identify the biological transition of development. You can articulate how biological transitions influence program design. So that would be like, you think about when young people are gaining some, like when you think of 5 to 7-year-olds don't have a lot of the fine motor skills that they need, and that's a biological transition. And once they gain those fine motor skills, then they can move into more complicated systems. So it's things like, so this is what it looks like essentially. So I just wanted to, like I said, I just wanted to share that with you, but you guys, and I will share all of these documents with everybody so you can see those. Are there any questions about the PRKC? I know that's really quick through it, but and it is, I could spend days training on the PRKC, but I'm not going to. I just always think it's important. As you look at if you look at the schedule of the orientation sessions, you'll notice that each one of the sections is actually linked to a competent or to a domain. So you'll see, like today I have the introduction to the PRKC, and then the rest of the afternoon the rest of the morning that we're gonna talk about is the 4-H youth development domain. And the reason I say that this is within the 4-H youth development domain, when we talk about what is the land-grant system, what is the history of 4-H, what's the organizational structure, it could probably fit into either youth development domain or the organizational. But I think it's important that we know about the system. So, any questions about that? Okay. All right. So now I am going to sorry, I have a text message from a staff person, so I just want to double check it. So we're going to talk about the land-grant system, and this is where you're going to hopefully get the answers to our polling questions. So what is a land-grant college or a land-grant university? It is an institution, and actually, the first one you guys all did correct. You guys all answered that one correctly. It is the Morrill Act of 1862 that established the first land-grant universities. So it was an act, the Morrill Act, that designated each university or each state to have a land-grant university. They were to have one. There are, what they did is they donate, or for each each legislator that each state had back in DC, they received 30,000 acres of land within their state. They could either build their land-grant university on that 38,000 acres if they had the funding to do it, or they could sell that land and use that land to build the university. So the original mission was to teach agriculture, military tactics, and mechanical arts, as well as the classical studies. So that what it was to allow university to be accessible to the working class. And so, up until 1862, really only the rich could go to college because it just wasn't affordable. So if you see like Texas A&M, there's Florida A&M, there's a few others, and I can't remember them right off the top of my head. But that's what the A&M stands for. If you weren't familiar with that, it's agriculture and military tactics or military science. So that's when you see that. So there were 3 moral acts that have been passed. So the Moral Act of 1862 is really what provided the first institutions. It was to reflect the growing demand for agriculture and technical education across the United States. And they wanted to expand beyond that traditional classical classroom. So Justin Morrill, who was I can't remember if he was a senator or a congressman from Vermont, proposed the Morrill Act. It was, now I will tell you, the first land-grant university in 1862 was Michigan State University. At that time, they were Michigan State College, and then when the Morrill Act passed, they became Michigan State University. I learned that when I worked there. So, and then in 1890, and every state received this funding. And as states were added into our union, then they received the same benefits that the current states had. So, those states that were at, we have many states that were added, especially here in the West, after 1862, and so they all still have the land-grant universities. And then in 1890, they passed the Morrill Act again, and what that did was it established a funding source and an endowment for those universities that were historically Black colleges in the South to receive land-grant status. Because, what it also established was it prohibited the distribution of money to any state who made distinction of race part of their admissions. So, if the university had race as a factor in their admissions, or, if that was part of their admissions process, then they did not receive the land-grant status funding. And then in 1994, the Morrill Act passed again, and what that did is gave land-grant status to 29 Native American colleges across the country. Now, I will tell you, there are 3 different funding sources for these institutions. There is the Morrill Act of 1862 that has one funding source. The 1890s, they're traditionally called, like, when you talk about land-grant universities, you'll hear land-grant university, you'll hear an 1890 land-grant university, and then you'll hear a 1994 land-grant university or land-grant college. Those are, like I said, those are 3 different funding sources within the federal government. So just to show you kind of a map, here's a map of the 1862 land-grant colleges. You can see that there is one in every state. It's interesting. The 2 that are the closest together are Washington State University and University of Idaho. And there's only 8 miles that separate the 2 institutions, and they do share a lot of resources. It looks like University of Maryland and then University of District Columbia. These, those are all pretty close together, but for the most part, We even have land-grant universities in Puerto Rico, Virgin Islands, Samoa, Guam, Northern Mariner Islands. They all have land grants. And then here's a map of the 1890s. You can see, they are primarily in the South. There is a new one, actually, I need to get a new updated map. There is a new one in Ohio, and I can't remember the name of that university, but it was just given land grant status within the last like 2 or 3 years, because I didn't even know it existed until. But you can see this is Prairie View A&M, Southern University, and A&M College, Florida A&M. A lot of these are that. Okay, and then these are the land grant. These are the 1994 colleges or universities or colleges. So I had the privilege in my career that I actually worked right in Michigan, right in the UP. That Bay Mills Community College was actually in the county that I worked in, where I was a 4-H agent, and I worked pretty closely with them. They did have an extension person, but we worked with them. And then when I worked in North Dakota, we worked quite a bit with Fort Berthold Community College and I think it was the Turtle Mountain Community College, and then United Tribes Technical College. So not all of them have an extension system. Typically the 1994s are still really trying to find their footing, but they are in existence. So, and then this is a map of all of them. So you can just kind of see. All right, and the purpose of the land grant is, and this comes right out of, I think, the Act, but the endowment, support, and maintenance of at least one college where the leading objective shall be, without excluding other scientific and classical studies, and including military tactics, such as teaching, such as branches of learning that are related, and then branches of learning related to agricultural and mechanical arts, and then the manner that the legislation of the states may respectively prescribe in order to promote the liberal and practical education of industrial classes. So if some of you were around, and I know a few of you were around, a few of you were not, when, or at least you had an understanding of the, of when UNR took their big cuts back in 2010 or whenever it was, one of the things that was talked about was trying to eliminate the College of Agriculture. Well, we're a land-grant university, and you cannot eliminate a College of Agriculture. So, it took severe cuts, but that's one of those things, to be a land-grant university. The other thing that's very kind of an interesting fact, I guess, if you're not aware, is every land-grant university in the United States has a moral hall. And if it's kind of fun. I don't do it very often, but when I do travel to other land-grant universities, I try to go see what their moral hall looks like, just because it's kind of fun to see what they are. Here at UNR, moral hall is, if you're familiar with the UNR campus, it's on the quad, at the end of the quad, and that's where development is. And so I actually went in one day. I had to go in for something, and I had to do a little history lesson with the people in there. They didn't know why there was a moral hall, and I thought, we work for land grant and we don't know about moral halls. So, all right. Any questions about land grant status? I know you guys knew most of the answers. I just always think it's important to talk about land grant university, because I was telling somebody, I said, I bet I can go stand on campus and do a poll, and probably a third of the students might know that it's a land grant university. Those that are in the College of Ag probably know it's a land grant university, and I would say over half of the faculty would not have a clue that we were a land grant university. So I always think it's important to let our 4-H staff know that we are a land-grant university and what that is. So the Hatch Act was established in 1887, and what that did is establish the agricultural experiment stations. So under this act, it appropriated money to be used for ag research. And, you know, at that point, research was becoming and that is a recognized function of the land-grant university. We're to take the research to the people. And, you know, in Nevada, we have a fairly strong research component. I see in the 3.5 years, almost 4 years I've been here, I've actually seen the research component of our university, the college especially, has our ag experiment stations has increased. It's become a lot stronger. And that's a lot to do with our current administration within the college. In 1914, the Smith-Lever Act was passed, and that's what established cooperative extension. So what this was a mutual cooperation between USDA, or United States Department of Agriculture, and the land-grant universities for conducting the ag extension work. We take the research from the university and take it out to the people. So you can see, you know, you guys can read just fine, but it is it's a key component for the largest delivery system in the world, which is the land-grant university, to take research. And the interest, you know, with cooperative extension, and a lot of states actually had some sort of cooperative extension before the official passage of the Smith-Lever Act. In Nevada, we celebrated our 100th year of extension in Nevada in 2014. So there's some really cool stuff on the university website, on the cooperative extension website. There's some great videos, there's some great history, and I could not find it today. I found a book. Somebody wrote a book right before the centennial about the history of cooperative extension in Nevada. And so it's a great resource to have. And I know I've got it, I just can't find it in my office. Probably your extension office has a copy. If you haven't seen it, your extension educator probably has that. There's two other websites that I think I personally think have a really good history kind of lesson. And so, University or West Virginia, and then also Penn State. So you've got those links. Okay. Okay. Any questions about land-grant university status? Or land-grant universities in general? All right. I'm going to pull up. So we're going to talk a little bit about the history of 4-H. Actually, I'm going to talk about the organizational structure first. Okay. That's not the one I want. This is what I want. Sorry. I've got too many PowerPoints. So I'm going to talk about the organizational structure first. And the reason I'm going to do that is because it'll make a little bit more sense when we look at the history. Okay. So as we look at the organizational structure, and what I'm going to do is talk about the national structure, the state structure, the county structure, and then foundations or kind of that private sector. So 4-H is made possible through our cooperative efforts between NIFA, which is the National Institute for Food and Agriculture at USDA in Washington, D.C., the land-grant university, and then also our state and county governments. And so when you look at this, so at the national level, there is USDA, so that is the congressionally approved home for the organization for which 4-H resides. It's administered by the U.S. Secretary of Agriculture, who is a political appointment, and we do have a new Secretary of Agriculture. Does anybody know what his name is? I'm trying to keep you guys involved. Make sure you're not sleeping on me. Anybody know what his name is? You can get out your phones or quickly do a Google search on your computer. You may know what state he came from. Okay, I think you guys are sleeping. I'm giving you a second. Okay. Ha, good job, Liz. Sonny Perdue, yep. And he comes from Georgia. He comes from Georgia. I believe he was the governor from Georgia. And he was the governor of Georgia. And then under USDA is what we call NIFA, the National Institute for Food and Agriculture. And so there are 6 units under USDA, and NIFA is one of those. They just, like within the last month, or I think it was in December, they had a new director of NIFA that was appointed. And what happens is that is actually also a presidential appointment. The governor, or I mean, the Secretary of Agriculture does recommend somebody, but it is a presidential appointment. And I just realized that I don't remember the gentleman's last name. It's Jeff, and he was the extension director, and I can't remember. I think he was from Georgia as well. But we do have, or no, he wasn't extension director. Anyway, I can't remember. If somebody wants to Google who the NIFA director is, used to be Sonny Ramaswamy, and he has since left. When his appointment was over, he was not reappointed because he was appointed by a different political party. And then we do have, within NIFA, there are different institutions. No, it's not Derek. His first name is Jeff, and I can't think of what his last name is. I could find it really quick, but yeah. No, it's not Dr. No, that's not it either. Can't think. Yeah, it's Jeff something. I know that much. But within the NIFA, there are institutes, and we fall within the Institute of Youth, Family, and Communities. And I do know that the administrator for that unit is Dr. Kreshe, and I'm not in. It's Makarab Kreshe. And then underneath that, there's a division for youth and 4-H. And so that's what we will say more of the 4-H national headquarters is what you'll hear us refer to that as. And right now we have an interim national program leader. Her name is Carolyn Krokel. She's also the family and consumer science leader. And so hopefully in the end of February, I will learn more about what's happening when we'll have a permanent person in that position. And then within 4-H National Headquarters, we also have what we call national program leaders. So there's somebody that oversees research and evaluation. There's somebody that oversees STEM. We have somebody that looks at healthy living, civic engagement, STEM, and then USDA is, and 4-H National Headquarters is where the name and emblem, the 4-H name and emblem, which we're going to be talking about in, I think, the next session. But that's where that is housed. And so when you have questions about that, you go to that. Their job is to really, provide program leadership, and then also provide, look at securing grants for us through some of those federal agencies. Okay, and then at the state level, so at the state level, it falls at the land-grant university, and that's our state partner. We have, as many of you know, we have lots of colleges within the university, but essentially our overall kind of answer is, the overall person is our university president, which right now is Mark Johnson. And then within that, we have the College of Agricultural Biotechnology and Natural Resources, or CABNR, and I have CABNR spelled wrong still. Gotta fix that. Sorry, when you see me circling, it's because I see things wrong in my PowerPoint. But we do fall under CABNR. That's a change within the last 2 years. And we do, and so the Dean of the College of Agriculture is Bill Payne. And then we have our director and extension director and associate dean for the college, and that is Ivory Lyles. He's been here just about a year and 2 months now. And then underneath that, there is under 4-H youth development, we fit under cooperative extension, and then we have the state 4-H office, which is the state 4-H program leader, myself. And then, and right now we have pretty much the state 4-H office is myself, and then we have Frances Brown, who is my assistant, and then the state 4-H camp at Tahoe also falls underneath the state 4-H office. And so, and then we also have our county extension educators, which have a responsibility within 4-H, whether they want to believe it or not. And then also our county 4-H program coordinators, assistants, or community-based instructors, depending on what you're called. I think, Liz, your title is, I can't remember if you're a coordinator or a manager. We've all got different titles now. So, and then we're going to be in the process of hiring in Vegas. We're actually going to be doing interviews in the next couple of weeks in Las Vegas for a faculty position that's going to be a program manager. So at the county level, and we also receive state, okay, your business card says coordinator. I know. I can never keep them. And I know, Jillian is an intern. Hopefully she'll decide that she likes this career, and maybe after college will come back to us. And then I know Joshua is a community-based instructor. So and we do receive state appropriated dollars. We receive tax dollars from the state of Nevada through the legislative process. And if you're not familiar with, and some of you may not, especially Liz, you probably haven't heard, or you've heard a little bit about that. We have asked for this in the legislative session that's coming up starting in February. We are asking, cooperative extension itself is asking for about, $4.7 million in what they call enhancement funding. And about $2.5 million of that will go to 4-H and helping support the 4-H program. So if you want to know more information about that, if you've got Facebook, there's some really good information. If you go to either Cooperative Extension's Facebook page, or Dr. Lyles actually now has a public page, and there's some really good information that they've been publishing about that enhancement, and the enhancement request is in there as well. So I just wanted, we do get money from the state legislature. Then you move down to the county level, and our partners are really, the county government. So we work with our county commissioners a lot. We work with the Nevada Association of Counties all the time. That's pretty much one of our main partners. Then we have our area directors, and there are 2 area directors. there is somebody housed in Las Vegas and somebody housed in Reno. There is still, I still haven't heard all the shakeout of how that's going to work. It used to be the North and the South, and it doesn't sound, I think it's just going to be Area 1 and Area 2 now. And so depending on where you live, you know, and the one of the area directors was just hired. I don't think it's been announced yet, but because I'm not sure if contracts have been signed exactly, but so we do have, you know, those two positions, and then we have our county extension educators. So really the role of the area educators is to support the teaching activities and the work of our 4-H professionals to ensure that there's program coherence, marketing, professional development, and evaluation within your position. Most of you are not going to be supervised by the area directors. Most of you will be supervised by your county educator, but the county educators are then supervised by the area directors. And, you know, but it does make sense that they would be a part of that. Whenever we have, you know, and then our extension educators are really, their responsibility is to ensure that the 4-H youth development program is conducted in counties that align with our statement of purpose and the core features of learning within youth development. And so essentially, you know, at the county level, the 4-H program, the county educator is responsible for the 4-H program. Most of them have instilled that responsibility to you, but it is a part of it. And so they also, you know, and then our 4-H professionals, those are our community-based instructors and our 4-H program coordinators, those types of individuals. You're responsible for the delivery of all aspects of the county 4-H program. And so really looking at, you know, you're working with the volunteers, with the parents, with the youth, you might be working with the schools, with community organizations to make sure that the young people do receive that programming. And then we have our volunteer leaders, and those are, you know, adults and older youth who serve as club leaders. They might serve as project leaders, camp counselors. They work directly with our young people, and, you know, and then they also might serve, maybe you've got someone that is kind of burned out of working with young people, which can happen, believe it or not. But they still want to remain involved, and so you could get them involved in what we call a middle manager type role, and maybe they're mentoring new volunteers or working with new families. And we're going to talk a little bit about some of those things when we talk about the volunteerism section, when we go into the volunteerism section. But all of these pieces are essential to our 4-H program. Now, we also receive money at the county level. Many of you, your salary is county funded. Your paycheck may come from the university, but what happens is the county sends the money to the university. And so that is, you know, that's one piece. The county provides the funding for the office space. They provide the travel funding, any of your county operations expenses. So it really is a three-way partnership. We also receive money from the federal level as well. So we receive federal funding, state funding, county funding, and then we have our fourth component, which isn't as big, but we do have the kind of the private side of things, or what we call a foundation. And we receive a lot of funding through that private sector as well. And, you know, at the national level, you'll hear us talk a little bit about National 4-H Council. That is our private partner. They provide grants. They establish programs and initiatives. They design and publish our 4-H curriculum and reference materials. They're the ones that are really going out and trying to get funding for the states. For those of you, and I know, Liz, you weren't around yet before, but for Josh and for Jillian, you're going to remember with the Common Measures grant, you know, with our evaluation and our Common Measures, that grant actually came out of National 4-H Council. So they went to a private foundation and got the funding, and then what they do is then offer those to the states. There's all kinds of grants out there from them. Now, at the state level, many states have state 4-H foundations. We do not currently in Nevada. It's one of my long-term goals, like probably 5 to 10 years down the road. But we do have a foundation or an endowment account or a foundation account within the university development that we can accept donations, and we can, when we find some of these things. And we are getting ready to launch a pretty significant capital campaign. So we're working with development for our 4-H camp and trying to get money for our 4-H camp. And so, so we do work with our development people quite often. Any questions about kind of that structure? Okay. So hopefully it'll make a little bit more sense as I talk about the history of 4-H, just because you'll have heard some of those phrases before. All right, so this is a national history, and then I've got a Nevada history. Okay, so 4-H was founded in 1902, and it's grown to now be the nation's largest and one of the world's largest youth development organizations. We reach approximately 6 million young people every year within the 4-H program nationwide. And you can see, our job is to make sure that our young people are prepared to be successful adults. So in 1902 to 1912 and late 1890s, the 4-H programs began throughout the country as Boys and Girls Clubs. They weren't called 4-H, they were called Boys and Girls Clubs. There's really not one person that's been credited for the organization of 4-H. But there were two groups. Ohio and Iowa fight all the time about who was the first 4-H program. But in 1901, there was a principal in Ohio that promoted vocational agriculture for out-of-school time. And then in 1902, A.B. Graham formed these Boys and Girls Clubs with officers, projects, meetings, and the record requirements. So you can see where they kind of, the one was kind of a semi-quasi, and the other one, really got into the heart of what we do. And last night I was on Facebook, and Iowa 4-H actually had a picture of where A.B. Graham, the first building where A.B. Graham put in those buildings, or put in this Boys and Girls Club. So it's kind of cool. If you get a chance, you can look at that. It was kind of neat. And then this is a picture of the first official 4-H club. That's not the building that they were in, but that's just a formal picture of them. And in 1907, the first emblem was nationally designed for 4-H by O.H. Benson. And it was the 3-leaf clover. You can see, it was head, heart, and hands. And then in 1911, Benson suggested that they add the word hustle to the fourth, as a fourth clover, fourth leaf, and the revised clover was adopted. And then, later on that year, because you'll hear that say, that hustle was the fourth H. Later that year, somebody else suggested that they replace hustle with health. And so the emblem stood for head, heart, hands, and health ever since. So it was in 1911 that the official clover was adopted, or what we know now as the 4-H clover, 4-H name and emblem. So in the second decade of 4-H, there was in 1918, that's when they used the first time that the term 4-H club was used in a federal document. And then in 1921, the National Committee on Boys and Girls Club work was formed. And, you know, I always love looking at these old pictures. Don't you love those cows? They're a little small. So in the third decade, you know, after World War I, the 4-H really started focusing on trying to become more organized. So this is when National 4-H Club Congress grew into 2 national tours. So some of you may have heard of National 4-H Congress. It used to be held in Chicago every year, and it was a big awards trip. But I mean, it was a big deal. It's now held in Atlanta, Georgia, and it is not necessarily an awards trip. Like when I say awards, every state had. So J.C. Penney's sponsored one person from every state to attend National Congress, and in clothing, you know, in sewing. And so, you know, every state would pick one winner. You know, it was a big deal. And then in 1924, the 4-H name and emblem was patented. And you can, you know, that's where the start of the 18 USC 707, which we're going to talk about next time, why that's important. But that's where that was really that's the start of that. And then in 1927, the state 4-H leaders adopted the 4-H pledge and the 4-H mottos. So the 4-H pledge of, I pledge my head to clear thinking, and then the 4-H motto of to make the best better. So you think about that 4-H motto, to make the best better, and that's been around since 1927. I think that's kind of cool myself. Then within the 4th decade, you know, they really started expanding 4-H activities, but because of World War II, that expansion was halted. And, you know, 4-H then looked at establishing some goals to help within World War II. And so you can see 3 of those goals were directly related to producing more food. And at the end of 1942, 4-H had enrolled 650,000 new members. That's a huge number for back then. And that's nationwide. So within the 5th decade, after World War II, it was in 1943 that 4-H our membership peaked at 1.6 million. And by 1945, the amount of completed 4-H projects was over 76%. Thought that was really, you know, I always think that's really interesting. Sorry, I need something. So within 4-H online, which I need to get training for everybody on 4-H online, but within that, there is a way to, when a young person completes a project, there's a way to mark that and be able to track what that percentage is. And also 4-Hers join campaigns, you know, at this point, they were joining 4-H to collect the essentials for those wartime efforts. Within the 6th decade, there was 4-H established in both Asia, Europe, and Latin America. And what I think is, you know, we still have 4-H programs across the world. In 1959, President Eisenhower participated in the dedication ceremonies of the National 4-H Center. We do have a National 4-H Council owns a center in Chevy Chase, Maryland. It's just outside of DC. It's an old college, a private college that they've converted into the National 4-H Center. Absolutely beautiful facility, and if you ever get a chance to go, you need to go and see it. So then within the 7th decade, there was in the Extension Committee on Organization, and you'll hear that heard now called ECOP, which is Extension Committee on Organizational Policy. But essentially it was, you know, and then a 4-H subcommittee agreed on encouraging participation of minorities in National 4-H events. So what I find very interesting now is I just got an email this morning from ECOP about their commitment to working with diverse audiences and vulnerable populations. So, you know, not only was it here, but it kept going. So in Chicago, a national workshop was designed for disadvantaged youth and was expanded into rural and urban areas in 1966. The national pledge was changed in 1973 to add the "and my world" to the end of the pledge. What I think is really a unique history kind of lesson for Nevada is we actually have a current county commissioner, Pete Olson. He's a commissioner in Churchill County. He was one of the youth that went to the National 4-H headquarters. He was one of, I think, 20 youth that went in 1973 and was part of that change. And he's very, very proud of that. And I'm proud that he talks about that. Membership grew in 4-H to 7 million youth in 1974. There was a postage stamp that was commissioned. I actually have 2 of those postage stamps. So it was commissioned, I think, in the 1950s. You can find them what happened was my son bought a great big box of stamps, like, probably about like this, just random stamps. And there were 2 of them in there. So bought it at a flea market. And then in our 9th decade, so as we're looking at, kind of the 1980s, 1990s, this is when we looked at exploring new technologies and major focuses on national extension initiatives. There was a study done in 1985 of 4-H alumni about the long-term impact of 4-H. That's where you're going to hear, when we talk about 4-H alumni, they say, the thing that they learn the most is speaking in front of others, and they learned organizational skills, and they learned record keeping. A lot of that came from this study, and what was concluded was the fact that 4-H has a powerful effect for decades on a young person, not just while they're in the program. Many of those alumni said that they use the skills that they learned in 4-H in their current roles. So in the present, we know that 4-H wasn't born overnight. It was developed over years. It took a lot of hard work and a lot of dedication, and we're continuing to grow. We're continuing to always expand our programs. We can't survive on our, on what was done in the past. If we were to rely on just animal programs, yes, it's one of our largest programs, but we would only reach 10,000 youth instead of reaching 70,000 or 65,000 youth. And the other piece is we also look at our delivery. Where do we go and deliver 4-H programs? If we were to rely on the 4-H club model here in Nevada, we would reach 4,300 young people a year. We have to look at going into schools, going into after-school programs, going into community events, those types of things. And then here's just a few websites. I'm not going to go into a lot of that. Okay, any questions about kind of that history? I now have a history of 4-H in Nevada that I'm going to find. Nevada 4-H history. And we're still doing good on time. I always like to try to make sure we're done on time. Okay, let me share my screen again. So this was a history of Nevada that was put together in 2014 for the centennial. So it was put together before I came, but it's still very, very relevant. So just so everybody kind of knows that history a little bit. Again, we talked about the Smith-Lever Act. This is, Nevada established their cooperative extension when this legislation went through. You can see those are some pictures of Nevada 4-H. It's to diffuse useful and practical information in agricultural and home economics. Many of you might have heard, it started with growing corn and canning tomatoes. So they figured out if they went and taught the young people, 4-H started, if they went and taught the young people, the boys, how to grow corn, how to get more production out of their corn, more bushels per acre, then their parents would pick up those strategies. And that's exactly what happened. The boys were given 1 acre of their family, family farm, and they produced, twice as many bushels as their dads. And so dad's going, how'd that happen? And started adopting. And then the same thing, they were noticing a lot of foodborne illnesses with canning products. And so they went in and taught our girls how to can properly. And the number of foodborne illnesses then went down because the mothers started adopting those practices. So in 1914, Norma Davis was the first extension employee in Nevada, and she began homemaking and 4-H youth education programs here. She drove more than 6,000 miles in her first year. Now look at that car and how comfortable that would be to drive 6,000 miles in that first year. I know, when I first started in Nevada, I actually drove the entire state and visited every county. And I think it was 2,500 miles is what I put on my car. And that wasn't very comfortable. And I can just imagine this. But what a great thing that she did. And she was, I think, based out of, if I remember correctly, she was based out of Churchill County, but then worked in, like Washoe and Douglas and Carson City and those. So then Mark Minkle, I can't remember exactly how you pronounce that. He was a longtime Elko County agent. When he was young, him and his brother exhibited blue ribbon poultry at the first state fair in Fallon. So in 1914, and then he went on to have a long and extensive career within Extension. The first yearly reports were recorded in 1915. And at that time, Nevada had 829 4-H members, and 169 of those completed their projects. At that point, that's probably all they were collecting, is just the number of members and the number of projects completed. Now we don't actually ask for the number of projects completed. But some of you may know we ask for a lot more than just numbers. Just those numbers. So by 1916, the four-leaf clover was well known. There were ag agents and home demonstrators that worked in Lyon, Washoe, Elko, Douglas, and Clark counties. So this is just a flyer from 1916. You can see it was getting a 4-H program up and going. And then the first ag agent in the north would be Joe Wilson, and he is shown in that picture. He served in the central and northern Nevada until 1946. And you can see he conducted youth projects in cattle, horses, and sheep that attracted people from all across the West. And then the first ag agent in the south was in 1916, Carl Vinson, and he did youth horticulture. And I find it really interesting that, you look at southern area, the southern Nevada still does a lot of work in horticulture. And then 4-H during World War I, there were 9 counties that had an ag, a home demonstration, or a county club agent. So it'd be an ag agent, a home demonstration, that would what we would call now an FCS person, and then or a county club agent would be a 4-H agent. And their goal that whole time was for increased food production. Even back then, they had county or state vehicles. If you can see that, they've got the agricultural research service or agricultural extension service on their car. So they had state cars back then. So they also, the youth grew fresh fruit and canning, fresh fruits and vegetables for canning, and also to help improve their health at home. The extension agents reached out to 1 in every 5 people in Nevada with youth or livestock programs to help with the sanitary conditions of their home. I wish we'd reach 1 in 5 now, but that's pretty tough to do. The partnership with the Farm Bureau was formalized in 1919 with the Nevada legislature, which adopted the 1 mil tax. So so it would have been about 1919 that each county collects a 1 mil property tax, 1 mil of their property tax, which, don't ask me what that, it's a measurement and I can't remember now for the life of me, but that's how the counties get their money for extension, by that property tax. And so in the 1920s, our 4-H enrollment soared because our extension educators were going into the schools, and all of our county agents, and they were called agents at the time, now they're called county educators, they devoted a third of their time to Boys and Girls Club work, to 4-H work. They were, the youth were active in livestock, clothing, and home economics. And within ag, you can see this, here's a really cool publication. I would love to get a copy of that, like the hard copy of that. But ag production expanded expands cattle to 500,000, and then the sheep reach almost a million number. There's almost a million. Probably at that time there was more cattle and sheep in Nevada than people. And then, at that time, many of our children were dangerously underweight. So they spent a lot of time on focusing on good nutrition for youth. Very interesting. The pendulum has shifted we're still focusing on nutrition, just maybe not for underweight. In the 1930s, during the Depression, the home demonstration, the FCS agents and the home demonstration agents stepped up their efforts to improve nutrition for low-income families. And that's really where we started within 4-H. We started working in leadership and opportunities, and then also community service. So 4-H numbers went down at this point, but many of our young people, sold their animals at California livestock shows, and so they were bringing home, it was kind of the start of that sale, and they were bringing home thousands of dollars to help those local economies. So, annual 4-H camp, the 4-H youth first held camp at the University Farm south of Reno. Now that's where Mackey Field is, so where the football stadium is. And a third of the 4-H state's members attended. They each paid $2.50 to attend 4-H camp. I wish we could do it that cheap now. But that's kind of a neat, again, great. And then it was in 1939 that the assistant director negotiated with the Park and the Rabe family, and then Douglas County property owners and the Farm Bureau to establish our current 4-H camp at Lake Tahoe. So if you haven't had a chance to go to that camp yet, I would highly suggest it. I think, and Liz, I don't know if you ever got a chance to go to the 4-H camp when you were here, when you lived here, but it is absolutely amazing. And Joshua, I'm not sure, I know Jillian was there because she went up this summer, but. So 1938, the valuable, this land became university property and the permanent camp, and it still remains as the 4-H camp in Nevada. That is our that's the only state-owned 4-H camp. We have many of our counties that use other facilities, but that one is actually our state 4-H camp. And you can see some of the pictures. It's, I like this, the one down on the bottom right-hand corner with the tents. We actually have a couple of our 4-H camp board members that went to 4-H camp at that facility when they used to sleep in those tents. We now have cabins there. And then the first junior livestock show in 1939, the first annual Nevada Junior Livestock Show was held in Reno. We still have the Nevada Junior Livestock Show. It continues. It is not a 4-H sponsored event, but it is an event that we support through the 4-H program, and most of our staff are involved in the planning and the putting on of the Nevada Junior Livestock Show. Okay, so during World War II, Extension was named the official agency of education for farmers and homemakers. So that's, that was kind of exciting. And then our program priorities shifted towards national security. The 4-H clubs, such as this one in Douglas County, joined the war effort. So this one of the clubs brought enough scrap iron to build 4 tanks for the armed forces. So that was one way, that community service is how we is what we were promoting at the time. We also, in 1942, 4-H newsletter would report those wartime efforts. One of the Churchill County clubs collected materials, and the clubs prepared members to serve their country. So they would they would work on those leadership skills to help our young people become successful adults and be able to serve in the military. The Food for Freedom effort, they had victory gardens. They increased by 50%, and most of the club projects were related to food production and conservation, or canning, that type of thing. So the post-war 4-H, we saw growth in 4-H membership as well as our ag production. Don't you love those cattle? And I don't think those are babies. And Kirby Day served in Humboldt County from 1947 to 1976. So he was one that helped bring electricity to ranchers, to upgrade systems and promote seed production and vaccinate the calves. So that was a huge thing for us. And then he also started 4-H clubs in Paradise Valley, Winnemucca, McDermott, and Nevada. So in the 50s, this was the grand champion beef at the California Hereford show was shown by one of our Nevada 4-Hers. And you can see this is the Las Vegas agent from 1958 to 1976. He was a former 4-H member and felt very strongly about developing youth programs as well as horticulture and family education. And in the 60s, Gail Monk served extension for 3 decades, emphasizing youth and agriculture programs. And I'm not sure where he was at, actually. I need to look that up. And you can see 4-H membership grew in the 1970s, and the 4-H camp was an opportunity to develop leadership. So this was, the Western Counties Junior 4-H camp at Lake Tahoe. It looks like 1970. So pretty significant number of young people. And in the 80s, they had the Western Regional 4-H Leadership Conference was an opportunity for education and fun as well. They actually used to do a Western Region team leadership event at our camp in Lake Tahoe every year. I think it was in the 80s and 90s. And that quit before I started working for Extension, or maybe right about the time I started working for Extension in the early 1990s. And it's something we've been talking about in the region as a potential of bringing back, so our teens can get together. And then in the 1980s, we had, livestock specialist Ron Terrell educated youth and ranchers to produce a healthier, so they were working with our young people to produce healthier products for our consumers. And that's why, when we with our livestock projects, I think it's really important that we teach our youth about the proper care. And again, 4-H Staying Alive was an urban Las Vegas latchkey program that reached about 3,500 participants. So Jillian, you should kind of look around and see if you guys have any of those old materials around. I'm not sure. And if some of you aren't familiar with the movie Staying Alive, that's probably why it was named that. And then Marilyn Smith was a youth educator, and she began to reach out to youth at risk in the 80s. Marilyn actually just retired not even a year ago. Well, it was right about a year ago. She was housed up in Elko. Many different responsibilities over the years, but I think she had about 45 years, almost 50 years of working with youth programs. So you can see she developed the first Project Magic, a juvenile offender program in Elko in 1989, and that program is actually still going in, I think, 3 or 4 counties in Nevada. So very, very successful program. In the 1990s, the Board of Regents recognized cooperative extension as a separate college at the university. So instead of being the part of the College of Agriculture, part of Cabner, we were our own separate college with our own dean and etc. But then in 2016, we were then put back into the College of Agriculture. So 1998, Karen Hinton was appointed dean and director, and I believe she remained in that role until 2014, when we had Mark Walker was the director, and then now is Ivory Lyles. So you can see, you know, our program has been helping the university to fulfill our mission, you know, the traditional mission. You know, cooperative extension, your gateway to the university. That, I don't think they still use that logo or that tagline, but it's, you know, that's one. After school programs are still a huge part, especially when they deal with STEM. And then we have, you know, 4-H club activities. This is, you know, these are older pictures too. Remember, these are from 2014. So here is Las Vegas youth learned how to separate DNA of an onion. Fields of Genes curriculum, and I think that's still out there actually. And now we're doing GPS, GIS, we're doing robotics, I mean, just amazing things. So, and you can see we're still doing some literacy, some anger management, I know parenting, those are all still a big part of cooperative extension. And livestock programs are still well and go, you know, still alive. And then, yeah, that was, okay. I have one more PowerPoint to share. Oh, okay. Sorry, I didn't see your comment until just now. So, so yeah, if you get a chance, Liz, to go up to the 4-H camp, you know, at Lake Tahoe, you know, it would be great just to visit. I know Elko uses a different facility, but it would be good just to see the facility. Okay, I've got one more PowerPoint that I'd like to share with you, and I think a lot of it I think you guys have seen, but I just want to I'm going to briefly share it with you because I know we've only got about 1.5 minutes, but we may go over just slightly. There we go. So this is just to kind of look at, this is our statement of purpose. So the University of Nevada Cooperative Extension, you'll also see it you'll see it condensed into UNCE. We don't like to use UNCE when we're talking to the public, but you know, within our own organization, we will use that. Is an age-appropriate positive youth development program that helps shape future leaders and innovators through research-driven, hands-on learning activities that focus on academic and career readiness. So as we're putting together programs, that's what we need to keep in mind. That's our ultimate goal at the end of the day. So the vision is a world in which youth and adults learn, grow, and work together as catalysts for positive change. We do have a promise to Nevada's youth. By 2025, 4-H will reflect the population's demographics, diverse needs, and social conditions of the country or of our state. The vision has the elements of inclusion, caring adults, involves at least 1 in 10 youth, and the volunteers and staff reflect the population demographics. Now, I will tell you, we also have a goal that especially if we get the dollars from the state legislature for the enhancement, that we will reach 100,000 youth in 5 years. I think by 2025, I think we want to reach 100,000 youth in Nevada. We currently, this year, we reached 67,000 youth. So there's growth. And then we do have kind of a tagline. I've been working with the university trying to get it in a logo, but they keep putting me off. But it's empowering communities, enriching lives. So I'm not, you guys can go back and look at these. These are just some of our demographics. You can see kind of growth and where we've grown and where we've decreased numbers. This is for the state. So This is one that I wanted to share with you. This is a proposed structure change, but this is kind of where it's looking like right now as far as the programmatic or the organizational structure of Extension. You can see Dr. Payne and then Dr. Lyles. And really what I want to do is just kind of show you guys. So the area directors, myself, and then underneath myself, there is the 4-H camp staff. Then our 4-H state staff, and then we are going to hopefully have some state specialists again working in specific areas. And then within that, I work very closely with our area directors, our 2 area directors, and then also obviously I work extremely closely with the county staff. And so when you have questions or comments, then you would come, you would get a hold of your county educator first, but that your extension educator first, and then then move up the chain. And then in here there are roles and responsibilities, so everybody's clear on those responsibilities. My job is to provide leadership for program related areas, to program coherence and expansion. So I'm always looking at ways that we can expand our 4-H programming, marketing, evaluation, and professional development. And then it goes into the area educators, the extension educators, the program officers, community-based instructors. So I'm, like I said, you guys can go in and read those. I know I just want to be cognizant of your time. If you have any questions on that, you can, feel free to call me. I can answer those questions. And so they, essentially that's for today. I know this is a lot of kind of background information, but I think it's really important that we know that kind of as we're moving forward into the careers of Extension. And so next month is when we're going to get into a lot more of the nitty-gritty type programs. Next month, we're going to talk about the use of the 4-H name and emblem. If you're not familiar, we have certain guidelines on use of the name and emblem. We're going to talk about managing risk within 4-H. And then also one of our theory areas of essential elements. And so we're going to talk about what the 4-H essential elements are and how that fits into when we're creating programming and when we're working with young people. So are there any questions for today? Like I said, I know that's a lot of information. I'm trying to make it a little bit more interactive. Obviously, you saw that my polls failed today, but I'm going to work on that for next month so I can keep it a little bit more interactive. I don't like being the talking head all the time. Any questions? Any thoughts? Okay. Yeah, I know today was a lot of it's going to be, I'll just tell you, it's a lot of information no matter what, but I think it's a lot of critical, I kind of pick topics that I think back to when I started my career and what I thought was, what I think is important. And, as I progressed, what will help set you up for success. So. Right. If there's no other questions, then I will let you guys go. and have a great day. Liz, I will probably either call you later today or I will call you tomorrow. I apologize for not getting you called earlier. It's been just crazy, and I ended up out Monday. So, and I'm working on trying to get up to visit both Josh and Liz. So I'm working on it. I want to come up and sit down and just visit with you guys. So it'll happen eventually. I know it'll happen sooner probably than later because my husband wants to come up and ice fish.